Hey everybody, and welcome back to the board meeting. Today we're going to have a little bit of a opinion piece for myself. This is going to be my opinion on the Board Game Geek rating system, a system that I used to rely on a lot, but now as the years have gone by, I find it less and less useful because the system just it seems to be a little bit more corrupted than it used to be. And I depend on that rating way less. And it's because of people. People are how are they rating games and what they're putting for their ratings and stuff is just not, I think, not what it's supposed to be, really. And of course, everybody's going to have their own opinion about this topic on here. And if you have a different opinion, that's perfectly fine. This is all my personal opinion. And so let's get into like the rating system for Board Game Geek. If you don't know, you can go on boardgamegeek.com and you can rate any game on there that they have a page for 1 through 10. 10 being the best game ever, basically, and 1 being just a useless pile of junk that you never want to play again. And you can rate that game at any time as long as they have a page for it. You don't need to have played that game ever. That game doesn't need to be published as long as they got a page for it. And a lot of times, people are rating games before these games are published, before they're played. I kickstarted this game, so this game I'm rating it a 10. And, that causes some problems then, because then people see those 10s and they're like, okay, they go in there and they're like, I'm going to rate this game a 1 to compensate for all the 10s. And then people see those 1s and they're like, okay, I'm rating this game a 10 to compensate for those 1s. And they just go back and forth, and those ratings mean nothing. They're diddly squat now because they've just kind of counterproduced themselves. And it happens all the time on Board Game Geek. And there's other reasons why people rate games like lower or higher, and I'll get into several examples, and I'll talk about some games that have been affected by that. And I started rating games probably around 4 or 5 years ago, and since then I've rated, thousands of games, and I'm pretty lenient when it comes to 1s. I don't make a lot of 1s. I think I just looked this morning how many 1s that I've ever rated, how many games I've ever rated a 1, and it's less than 10. And then I looked at how many games that I thought was 10, like a perfect game for myself, and that's like around 10. So I don't go to 10s and 1s very often. It's just not something that I do. I'm usually, most games stick between like a 5 and 8. That's kind of like the average rating for me. If you get higher than the 8s, it's a stupendous game or an awesome game. If you're like at a 4 or lower, that game I do not like at all. If I rated a 1, I think that game is broken and terrible components, terrible rule books, just a compounding of all these bad issues is a 1 for myself. And so when other people rate 1s, I'm like, I don't think that game's a 1. Maybe it's a 5 or something, but I don't think it's a 1. And I want to get into like 4 different examples of times when I'm like, this rating system is just useless almost to me now. And that is the first one. It was a battle between 2 games, between a Gloomhaven and Brass Birmingham. 2 games that I really enjoy. I enjoy both of them a lot. But Gloomhaven was number 1 on BGG. It was the highest rated game on there for years. And then Brass Birmingham started getting some momentum years after it was published, actually. And like all of a sudden it was threatening to overtake it. And then so everybody was going on there. And if you wanted Brass Birmingham to pass Gloomhaven, you were rating, Gloomhaven a 1 and Brass Birmingham a 10. And people were doing the opposite, rating Gloomhaven a 10 and rating Brass Birmingham a 1. Not because that was their feeling of that game. They didn't think those games were a 1, probably. It's just they wanted Brass Birmingham to pass it because maybe they didn't like Gloomhaven that much, and they wanted Brass Birmingham to be number 1. So there's some manipulation of the rating systems there that it becomes, is Brass Birmingham really the number 1 game, or did people just not want Gloomhaven to be number 1? Either way, I mean, Brass Birmingham is now number 1. I think it's a good game, fun game, and I like Gloomhaven as well. And another example is when people feel like they've been slighted by the company, they will rate these games 1s or lower. And it happened with Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, and for a specific reason, because this is a game that I actually backed on Kickstarter, and when it got delivered, it actually got delivered a different version, a cheaper version got delivered to Target 2 weeks before the Kickstarter people who backed it got theirs. And people went berserk over it. They were really mad at this company for doing that, for releasing it into a wider audience before the Kickstarter people got it, even though it was not the deluxe version that people were backing on Kickstarter. But they went on there and roasted that game, and it got ones and stuff for the first several months that game was out. It was just getting ones like crazy. It had a horrible rating. It has slowly recovered over time, where people don't buy the game and they're like, oh yeah, this is a decent game. To me, I didn't really like Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition that much. I like Terraforming Mars. Ares Expedition is one that I bought the all-in deluxe version. I ended up getting rid of it after like several plays of it. I'm like, I'd rather just play Terraforming Mars. I don't think it's a terrible game or anything. It's just I'd rather play Terraforming Mars. I think I rated it like a 6.5 or something like that. So nothing bad or anything. But people just lost their minds that they didn't get that game before the retail version came out. To me, it didn't bother me that much, but some people, it really bothered them. And then they just tanked that rating for Ares Expedition until the other ratings from the wider release audience finally caught up to it. But it was like at like a 5.5 or something for the long time. I think it's like at 7.5 nowadays. But yeah, so for a while it got dropped a lot. Next game I want to talk about is Wingspan, because when people think a game is overrated, they will rate that game a 1. You know, they'll go on, well, I don't think Wingspan deserves all that hype that it's getting, so I'm rating it a 1. Maybe I think that game's like not that great of a game. Maybe I would think it's a 4 or 5, but I'm going to rate it a 1 because it's getting that hype that I don't think it deserves. And a lot of people do that with these. I'm just giving Wingspan as an example because it's one of like the most hyped up games of all time. I personally enjoy Wingspan, but there's some people that don't, and I perfectly fine. There's people in my game group that don't like Wingspan, but there's people in my game group who love it. But I don't think anyone in my game group would say, hey, it's a 1. This game is terrible and it's broken. The game it's a beautiful game, and it's a fun mechanical game for myself at least. And so a lot of people, when they think a game is overrated, they will drop that rating because they're like, it's getting too much hype. I need to compensate for these other people who I think they're wrong by doing this. When, the people who do like it, they like it. It's not like a lie. They think it's a good game. They think it's a fun game. And to me, if someone likes a game, let them like a game. Don't yuck their yum, So then that example was Wingspan. Next, we're going into someone it's more like a political thing that happened with them. And so people were dropping this rating. And that's Tournament Fishing. And that's because of the owner. And I won't get into much of the political stuff because I don't want to get into the political stuff on here. But people didn't like the owner because of some political stuff. Not like the designer or things like that. But the person who was the owner of the publishing company. They are like, nope, we are tanking this rating. And it's still rated at like a 5 rating or something like that. But from people that I've heard talk about the actual game itself, I've never played this one, but they're like, oh yeah, it's a fun deck building game. So yeah, that's Tournament Fishing. People make a political statement and give it 1, which is whatever. But to me, I'm like, I don't want to get into that stuff. I want to know how the game itself is. And yeah, that's kind of the games and examples I wanted to give for this. But what do you think about, when people are like the rating system for Board Game Geek as a whole? Does it work for you anymore? Or like, when I go on a game and a game website and I'm like, oh, it's got like an 8.3 rating. And then I look at how many ratings there are and it's like, there's 15 ratings and 12 of them are 10s, and I'm pretty sure it's from the designer, the publisher, the designer's wife or husband, their relatives, and they're like, okay, we're going to boost this game up. That the ratings don't really mean too much then if people aren't, being truthful about certain things when they're rating games. So yeah, just make sure you comment down below your thoughts on just this topic as a whole. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe to see more weekly content from me, Shane, at the board meeting in the future. Hope you all have an amazing day. Take care.